So you just said, volume heals a lot of wounds. And I also said, but it can also cover mistakes because you can be like, wow, there's more volume, there's more money. But still, if the percentages are set up wrong, more money doesn't equal more profit. There's a very big difference between total revenue and total profit. All right. And we want to make sure that your total profit is super healthy and your total revenue, not just total revenue.
Hello, and welcome to Build Your Remarkable Practice podcast. This podcast is dedicated to chiropractors who are in the seasons of launching and building their practice. Join myself, Dr. Lona, and my co-host, Dr. Bobby, as we have conversations each week as it relates to building the practice of your dreams. And remember, you can have a remarkable practice as part of a remarkable life, not instead of one. We're here to lead you on the way.
What is up, team? Welcome back to the Build Your Remarkable Practice podcast with the amazing Dr. Lona and myself, Dr. Bobby Eliassi. Lona, I've missed you. I feel like I haven't done a couple of episodes now with you. I know you've spoken to Dr. Franson. I've spoken to Dr. Oz. I've missed you. What's been going on, Lona? How you doing?
I know. I was thinking the same thing. It's been a while. I was in Mexico, so that was pretty great. Had a good Thanksgiving. How about you? What have you been up to?
Oh man, I've been super busy but super productive. I'll have a lot of people right now as we're recording this. It's the very beginning of December, guys. But a lot of people I speak to now, Lona, they're kind of like, "Oh, the year is coming to an end, and so I'm kind of getting ready for the crazy period." And I'm like, "No, man." I reframe that. I'm like, the year is young. We've still got like 4 weeks left of this year. You know how much stuff we can get done in the last 4 weeks of this year. So I've been mega productive because I know I'm going to switch off. Right when Christmas comes around, I'll have 2 weeks just enjoying the Australian heat, getting to the beach, spending time with family and kids and relatives. And we've got such a stacked like December and January. So I'm not switching off. I've been full speed ahead.
Well, and to your point, we did an episode on this. If you missed that one, go back and listen to it, of how to end your year strong so that you come into January like ready to go instead of feeling like you're hungover from the holidays and you checked out early. So that was a good episode we did, and practical for right now.
Yeah, I've been speaking on that on coaching calls all week. How to avoid the January hangover. It's what you do in December that you're gonna really avoid the January hangover. And I know this episode will come out for us still in December, guys. So it's not too late. Even if you listen to this on Christmas Day, right? Hopefully not Christmas Day. Maybe you're listening to this on the day after Christmas, Boxing Day. All right. It's not too late. You can do that all the way up until the 31st of December, and you can seize the opportunity. So I'm excited. Lona, I'm super pumped. I got my wing lady back. Lona's back with me in the driver's seat. So we are going to blow the socks off of this podcast today. And when we're discussing topics, this topic really stuck out for me because it's one that I get super excited about. And it's one that I feel in chiropractic is too often overlooked. And let me just share a story of where it stems from. Over the years, I've spoken to multiple people, and Lona, I know you're the same, that what they tell me is they say, "Bob, I've been doing all the right things. I'm growing. I looked at my revenue from this year compared to last year, substantial uptick in revenue. I looked at my quarter to quarter, substantial uptick. All the metrics, from a practice point of view, look good. But yet there's still not more profitability or money in the bank, okay? At the end of the day, why am I more profitable?" And over the years, I heard this conversation so many times that I was like, okay, we really need to make sure that we slay this dragon, because if we want chiropractic to be more successful, we need more financially successful chiropractors and chiropractic officers so that we can continue to pour back, serve into our mission, and help more people, guys. We cannot help more people from a place of lack or from a place of poverty. We can only do it from a place of abundance. And I know that if your needs are being more than met, they're being exceeded, then when you put money in the right hands and the right hearts, that only allows us to expand more and to help more people. So, Lona, I'd love to get your feedback on this, because we're going to talk about how you increase the profitability of your practice 2025, make it the most wildly profitable money-making year. That's right, money-making year that you've had to practice to date. I'd love to get your input on this. What are your thoughts around this? What have you noticed with practices, and what's one of the reasons for it? And then we're going to talk about strategies that you can be planning now so that we can launch them in January to make sure your profit margins are cranking next year.
such a good time to have this conversation. I have had it quite a bit in my masterminds and my one-on-ones in the last couple of weeks, just trying to help people really get their numbers straight and know what they need to do for 2025 as far as like where they're setting their fees and whatnot. And even when I was talking to Dr. Franson, I know we touched on this a little bit. So I have been probably not shocked, because I think most chiropractors come into chiropractic just with this like servant-hearted, want to serve as many people chiropractic, and we can get ourselves in a trap of then also feeling like I remember a mentor said, volume heals all wounds. And on some level that is true. But it also builds you into a box if you're not paying attention to, how much it's costing you to deliver an adjustment, and what if you want to invest in your team. And
Hey, I'm gonna jump in here because I love that, but I've also heard volume covers a lot of mistakes.
oof, it's true, and it is true, because it's that's like two sides of the coin, right?
Yep.
And what I've noticed in having some of these conversations is some of the most beautiful chiropractors, when we look, under the covers essentially, and we see like what are you collecting per visit as an average, and what does it cost you, especially now as you're starting to invest more in your team, and maybe you have more associates than you've ever had, or you have your first associate or more CAs, and your overhead has gone up. It can be really hard on that person to realize, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like I have no profit margin here. I'm serving a lot of people. People are getting care, but at the expense of my own health and well-being, because I can't take this thing to the next level if I don't have the profit margin there. So, it's a painful point, but it's one of those things, just like looking at your student loan debt. Like, don't ignore it. Go look at it, find out how much it's costing you per visit, and then set an appropriate, raise, so that you get yourself out of this position where you might be hemorrhaging money on where your fee structure is at.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. So we're going to do an episode in the future, guys, where we speak about, well, what percentage of your revenue, total revenue, should go to your rent, roughly? What should go to your marketing? What should go to your CAs? What should go to your associates? Depending on how your office is set up, right? We're not going to break that down today, but there is definitely, just I want you to know, absolute best practices of what percentage should be going to different areas of your business. And you've got to know those numbers. And in my experience, I would say over 90% of the practices have that incorrectly set up. So what that means is you've got a business model that's set up incorrectly. And by growing that business model or putting more new patients in, which costs money, okay, you just expose the broken business model more. So we're going to do an episode on that in the future. But for today, we want to give you tips, action steps, all right, that's going to immediately increase your profitability. So here's one thing that I know, Lena. If you want to increase profitability in 2025, at the end of the day, there's three primary ways that you can do it. All right. And the three primary ways are increase more new patients. That costs money. So you got to be careful with that one, because if your model is broken to begin with and we're just putting more newies in, that is definitely not where you want to start. Okay. The second thing is you can increase your volume. So you just said, volume heals a lot of wounds. And I also said, but it can also cover mistakes, because you can be like, wow, there's more volume, there's more money. But still, if the percentages are set up wrong, more money doesn't equal more profit. There's a very big difference between total revenue and total profit. All right. And we want to make sure that your total profit is super healthy and your total revenue, not just total revenue. Okay. And the third way that you increase the amount of profitability inside the office, and the easiest way, okay, and the way that gets the biggest ROI, is actually to just increase your fees. Okay. Now, my experience with fee increases, and I'd love to hear your take on this, Lena, is that a lot of offices either don't do it at all, and it's like 2 or 3 years have passed, and oh yeah, it's time for us to increase. They do it, but they do it based on gut. So I'll go up. It's been about 18 months, right? And how much are you going to go up by? Maybe $2, $3 an adjustment. All right. So they don't do it. They do it by gut feel. Or number three, very, very, very few people have a systematic, proper way to do it. They do it regularly, and it's based on something which we're going to show you the formula today. But increasing your fees is the number one way to immediately increase your profitability inside your office. Lena, what's been your experience with this? So how is this something that we can leverage in 2025?
Yeah. And I was like many people, where I, would do it, but it would be like $1, a $2, maybe just based off of a feeling, right? Not really knowing my numbers, not really knowing what my overhead per visit is, especially not trajectorying that out, what the next year would look like, especially if I was going to hire another doctor and the changes that I knew were coming. And so that's something that I have learned in the last 5 years, is how to really look at my numbers more often and understand more of like what is profit, what is actually overhead. I didn't used to even count myself in the overhead. So if you're not counting yourself in the overhead, that's a problem. And that helps me then arrive if it is going to be a $2 raise or a $6 raise. And, in having the conversations I've had in the last couple of weeks, I also realized, you might be listening to this and realizing my back end is a mess, right? Like, our care plans are a mess. I don't know if my CAs are tracking things well. And so the idea of even raising your fees sounds overwhelming because your back end's a mess. And it's, again, one of those things where it's like, okay, the only way out of this is just clear awareness that something has to change. And maybe even before you get a raising of the fees, you need to go in there and clean up the back end of your books and actually understand what's there and what's missing and maybe what's sitting out in accounts. And I know this can be a painful conversation, and you might hear us talking about it like, that sounds great, but you couldn't possibly help me because I don't even know what my books look like. Well, now's the time to start diving in. Right.
Yep, exactly. 100%. And I love how Lona always takes such a hard view to it, right? Because I'm going to be now very practical with you guys. I'm going to be very direct with you guys as well, right? And when I say you guys, this goes for all of us, right? When I teach this is a great reminder for myself as well, okay? So here's one thing. If you're listening to the podcast now, I would say set a regular time per year that you're doing fee increases. January is a great time. Now, a tactic that we've employed over the years is every time that we fee increase, we also value increase. So, or we value increase first, then fee increase. And then the fee increase comes alongside this also new value that you're getting. So if you're thinking in 2025 that you're going to be doing regular workshops inside the office, that's value add for your practice members. If you're thinking in 2025, you're going to be updating more team members, like we're onboarding someone who's basically a organic social media specialist. So she's going to make sure that our organic social media is really rocking it, and there's educational pieces, and all practice members are joining our social content as they kind of join the practice. There's value in them. Like, I don't binge on social media at all, but the people that I follow is the people that I want to pour into me. So that if I do happen to get on social media, what's going to cross my screen is going to be something that's actually going to like pour into me. But then taking action is important. It's not just the sake of scrolling for the sake of scrolling and feel good that you don't action it. But the point is, always when you do a fee increase, sit down and have a look at what are all the value drivers that you've either increased in the practice this year or you're about to increase, because that money always follows value, right? So if you've upgraded equipment, if you've installed scanning technology, if you've installed x-rays into your machine, into your practice, if you've upgraded your space, if you've upgraded your team, if you're training your team, if you're doing workshops, right? If you've got new products that you're offering, if there's new practitioners that you're offering, these are all certain examples of value upgrades. If you've extended your hours, if you've changed your hours, all value upgrades, right? So always sit down first step and write a list of all the value upgrades that you've done this year. That's step number one, all right? Step number two is how much do you increase your fees by? So Lena, I heard you say something before and I was exactly the same. What did you used to do? So you would be like, oh, I'll go up by $2 because it kind of feels right. Is that right?
Yep. Well, that number looks good. Mm-hmm.
Hey, me too. I used to do that too. It's like, oh yeah, let's go up by $3. All right. And here's what I found, that the majority of offices, their CVA is far too low. And your CVA stands for your collection visit average. So how much are you collecting per person on average that you serve inside your office? It's way too low, right? And we used to do the same. And then here's the thing that I realized. If you're not going up minimum by the rate of inflation, okay, minimum, and I would say slightly above inflation, you've actually become less profitable even though you're increasing your fees. And you're putting your practice members through that, oh, we're doing a fee increase, okay? You're putting them through that feeling, but you haven't actually clawed back any profitability. Now, I've noticed over the years, the reason why I would push back on fee increase in the early years is because I used to think, oh, people would drop out, right? Like you get people that would be dropping out and there'd be a lot of, unrest. And here's what I found very quickly when I started doing fee increases regularly is the only people who dropped out were, quite frankly, the ones who I wanted them really to drop out anyway. What's been your experience with this, Lena?
Yeah, no, I love that you said it. Yeah, no, and what you just said there too about like, it is a mental exercise to realize like there is so much value besides even the adjustment you give, which is priceless, as we say, like the value in how am I pouring into bettering my team so the service here gets better, and the technology we need to do that, or, you know, we just invested in technology that drips more education to people, like that costs money, right? Like all of these things help you get your mind right to then go look at your CVA and look at what it costs you per visit and see where the breakdown is between there, because sometimes that's a tight line, right? Especially if you haven't figured yourself in that.
Exactly. Now look at this. We've all lived through the last 3 years. And if you haven't noticed, the cost of inflation has been insane in the last 3 years. Petrol prices have doubled. And I heard this stat actually a few weeks ago. Ready? It blew my mind. The stat was talking about a product that cost $72 in 2019. Okay. For that product to have the same level of profitability today, right? End of 2024, so 4 to 5 years later, that product should now be priced $101 to have the same level of profitability that a $72 product had in 2019. Okay. When I heard that, that blew my mind, because one of the things I quickly realized is we haven't gone up at that rate. And so what rate do you go up by? I always go up above the rate of inflation. In fact, there has been years, guys, I kid you not, we've gone up by $10 an adjustment. And when you hear this, you might be like, wow, $10 an adjustment. Okay. This is what happens. There's the, I would call it in this case, right? The 20. No, let's do this again. I would call this 30% of people, when we did that fee increase, were like, you know what, about time. You guys haven't done your fee increase like this properly. They actually congratulate you. They're like, you know what, we've seen all the things you guys are doing here in your office. Like, this is a phenomenal product. You'll have 30% of people that will be stoked that you're doing it. Okay. Then you'll have roughly about 60%, all right, in the middle that just need an explanation. They need like, hey, Lona, it's gone up. And this year, here's some of the cool changes that are happening in the office. We've had this, we've had this, we've had this. Next year, we're introducing this and this and this. And those people will be like, oh, cool. All right, makes sense. All right. And then you've got roughly about that 5 to 10% that fit into that category of like, ooh, okay. Now, in my experience, the less big a deal you make out of this, the better. Because when I was in my teens lineup, I used to be in this gym here in Australia called Fitness First, right? And I'll never forget, I got this letter from them once. And the letter sounded so beautiful. It was like, dear Bobby, we value you so much. You're such an amazing, member here of Fitness First. You've been with us for so long. It was framed in a way that I'm like, oh, I'm getting a gift, right? I was like stoked, like they're about to give me something. And then it followed on with, we've got to increase our fees by, I think it was $3.50 for every 2 weeks, right? And I was like, oh, I kind of left a little bit of sour taste in my mouth. Then what would happen is every time they'd send this letter, they had conditioned me where I'd be like, oh, fee increase letter. I'd read the first line, and after a while, I'd be like, I know it's a fee increase, to the point that I would call them, and then I would look to cancel my gym membership. And then they'd always try and salvage it by like offering me something. And then one day they didn't offer me anything, right? I still didn't cancel my membership, right? But what I realized is after a while, they stopped sending this letter. Now, I kept being a member of this gym for another 6 years. They kept doing fee increases. I just never knew they were doing fee increases. So I stopped complaining, right? It just became an expectation. But the reality is, those people in your practice that complain, guys, I have come to realize that either our office isn't the right place for them, and I'm totally cool with that. Chiropractic is for everyone. I'm not everyone's chiropractor. Or number two, really, it's not a reason to drop out of care. It could be a reason to adjust your frequency. If someone is on a weekly wellness plan, right, and if they're really going to kick back on it, they can move to a every other week, or in Australia, we call it a fortnightly maintenance plan. And guess what? They're still under regular care, maintaining their health status, and it's actually costing them less now than what was costing them before.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I think if you look outside our industry, right, this happens to you all the time, where you don't know the like new fee or the extra fees, or you're on some sort of auto payment and it goes up a couple bucks, and they don't, maybe there was an email that went out, maybe not, but people don't bat an eye to it. So, I think, again, it's more our bleeding heart in chiropractic that I think gets us all tripped up over these conversations that are just practical business and just look outside our industry. And it is a normal thing that, of course, we need to pay attention to this. And of course, in order to serve people at the level that we want to for years to come, we have to be aware of these numbers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So that's the process for it. Now, I said, that was step one. Step two is we've got to train our team. So I've come to realize that when you do a fee increase, there's roughly a 2-week period of time where you're having more of these conversations with people. So your team has to be equipped with like, hey, there's been a small adjustment to the fees, whatever it is. It's no more than the price of a large cup of coffee. A large cup of coffee here in Australia is like $5 or $6, right? It's no more than Charlotte's price of a large coffee. You've got to train your team with how you're going to have that conversation with people. And believe me, the majority of people won't care. If you're someone that's already doing financial plans, so people are on like financial plans and things like that, they won't even remember. It'll be like, hey, your new monthly amount is whatever it is, right? Like $490. You'll get a bunch of people that'll be like, oh, what was it before?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was $450. So you went up in an example like that by $6-7 an adjustment. They don't even realize, oh, okay, cool. Okay. So you've got to train your team. In the first 2 weeks, I find you'll have more conversations about it. In the second 2 weeks, you'll have a lot less conversations about it. Once 1 month is passed, you'll be having no more conversations about it, right? But when your team is trained up, they're going to be dialed in with how to handle those conversations and just set the expectation. Guys, next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking to more people about it. Then we're on the other side of that. And then we're talking less people about it. And then after that, we're not talking to anyone about it anymore.
Also, nugget, if your team, the person that is handling finances in your office, is one of them that has the most kickback to this, likely you have them in the wrong role, right? Yeah.
That's a home run. Exactly right. Because explain to your team, guys, that by us actually increasing fees, it allows us to do better work. Okay. The reason we're increasing the fee is because we want to be able to continue to pour in, continue to bring the best product to our community. It's not because we want to make less money, or it's not because we're increasing our fees now because, I don't know, I want to buy a new car. It's got nothing to do with that, right? It's got to do with the fact that we need a business that is healthy, that is thriving, that is profitable, so that we can continue to actually even deliver a better product. And if you want any examples of this to build your conviction, just have a look at the price of cigarettes, at the price of petrol, at the price of, I don't buy milk and bread, but I don't know, but look at the price of milk and bread over the last few years. You know, look at the price of flying, okay? So look at the price of all of these things. You know, business class flights tickets, guys. I go to Europe every single year for a vacation. I remember business flight to Europe used to, when I was flying from Australia back pre-COVID to 2009, for about $4.5 to $5.5 grand, you'd get a return business flight to Europe. Right now, it's closer to about 9 or 10 grand, so it's doubled. And let me tell you, business class is still packed. Okay, maybe economy is different. So I took an economy flight. That economy packed, airports packed, right? So just look at everything around you and you'll quickly start to realize that fee increases is not something that, oh, maybe we do. It's an absolute necessity of business. Otherwise, inflation will slowly kill off your business.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so good. And if you're wondering, like, okay, you guys have talked about fee increases, because I know we've had some nuggets of this in other podcasts. It's because we know that this is one of the stumbling blocks for so many of you to be able to really serve the vision you want, is we have to have the ability to, yes, of course, we'd love to take more dividends out of our practice and make more money. Who doesn't want that? But you also need the juice to invest in your team, to invest in coaching, to invest in marketing, to do all the things that you really want to do if you're playing full out. That comes from having a healthy profit margin.
Yep. And right now is the perfect time in the year to be having this conversation, right? So if you haven't done a fee increase, or if you've done one, but it's been more than 6 months, January. If you've done one recently, let's say you do one in August, just set July as your regular time every single week you're going to do the fee increase. Okay. But I know the majority of you, and I'm talking to you right now when you're listening to this, guys, right? You probably haven't done a fee increase, dare I say it, not for longer than 6 months. Dare I say it, for a few of you, it's going to be longer than a year, much longer than a year. All right. And so I want this message for you to hear it. Believe me, people are not going to drop out. You will get a larger percentage of people that actually congratulate you and say, you know what, great work, right? It's about time, than you will people that contest you. And you'll always have a majority in the middle that they just don't care, right? You just need to understand how to explain it. Okay. We need to understand our conviction behind it, and your team needs to have conviction behind it. And believe me, 2 weeks will pass at the drop of a pen, right? And 2 weeks later, you'll be like, wow. And just do the math in this. You tell me this, okay? If you increase your fees, let's just pull a number out. Let's pull out $6 an adjustment. And let's say if the average practice, which it doesn't, but let's say it should be running at a 20 to 30% profit margin once everyone is paid, including, yes, yourself, your weight should be paid as well. So if we just work off, it's gonna be easier for my calculations, a 30% margin, that's $2 extra profit every single adjustment. Yeah. And if you're even at So whatever number you're on here, you might be listening to this and go, you know what, I'm on 200 visits a week, right? So 200 visits a week, and you're increasing that by $2, that's $400 a week profit. If you times that by 50 weeks of the year, that's $20,000, right? Just profitability increase, just by a small increase like that.
There's your marketing budget, right? Like you can push that back in with so many people aren't spending what they need to grow their practice to the next level because they're not spending enough on marketing, right?
Yep, spot on the mark. And you might be listening to this and going, you know what, I'm realizing I'm behind. $5 ain't enough. Guys, I've done fee increases in 1 year of $10 in adjustment, literally. Okay, so believe me that you need your numbers set up properly if you want to grow in 2025 and grow profitably and sustainably.
So good. Awesome. Coming up in January, just so we point you in the direction, we've got our team building happening. So if you're also wondering like, I've never brought my whole team to a seminar. Well, you need the capital to do that, to invest in getting their flights, bringing them down to get training. We would love to tell you more about that. If you want to learn how to leverage your team better, bring them to our team building seminars that are coming up.
And I'm glad you brought that up. If you're a business owner, guys, there's going to be a business owner breakout session. We talk about this in detail. So full live breakout session, talking about overheads, margins, how much should you get dedicated to different parts of your business? What does a good profit margin look like? How do you increase the profit margin? Where are the primary profit centers? You as the business owner need to be having these business conversations. Team building immersion, guys, both in the US and in Oz in Australia. We're going to be having breakout sessions specifically on this, so get registered. Hey guys, if you're liking this podcast, the best way to keep up with this is follow us on our socials. So both Dr. Lona and myself, add us on Instagram, guys, and we regularly post on Instagram not only podcast updates, but if you want to have a close look into our personal lives and see how we execute things, practice, how it all works, follow us on social media. You guys are going to get hot tips into there as well. Dr. Lona, I love having this conversation with you, and awesome being back on, and I'll talk to you really soon.
You too, buddy. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Build Your Remarkable Practice podcast. Remember, what the world needs now is chiropractic, and what chiropractic needs now is more successful chiropractors. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, share with your friends, and leave us a review. And if you'd like to connect with us personally, please click the links in the show notes to schedule a call.